The hearing room was a theater of tension. Oak-paneled walls and rows of camera lenses bore silent witness as Congresswoman Jasmine Crocket leaned into her microphone, her voice sharp but restrained. With all due respect, Justice Jackson, the interpretation of the 14th Amendment isn't a privilege of the robes. It's a responsibility of the people. Across the table, Associate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson raised her eyebrows, the barest tilt of her head betraying displeasure. She had not expected to be called before this special congressional subcommittee, chaired by progressives seeking judicial accountability on voting rights decisions, but certainly not to be spoken to like this. "Congresswoman Crocket," she replied, her voice sonorous and cool, "I am acutely aware of my responsibilities. But judicial interpretation is not about catering to public sentiment. It's about precedent, balance, and constitutional fidelity." Jasmine didn't blink. And when precedent conveniently forgets who the Constitution left out, what happens then? Balance for whom? Reporters scribbled faster. Staffers exchanged glances. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was two brilliant black women in the highest echelons of government, locked in ideological combat. Crockett wasn't posturing for sound bites. She was challenging what she saw as a betrayal of lived reality by lofty detachment. Justice Jackson, in turn, saw a dangerous unraveling of judicial independence, of constitutional discipline. Each woman believed the other was fighting for the soul of American democracy, and neither would yield. Later that evening, the debate spilled into the post-hearing press rounds. Justice Jackson, still in D.C. for a lecture at Georgetown Law, agreed to a moderated conversation aired live on PBS. She expected legal sparring, not Crockett waiting in the wings as an unannounced second guest. The moderator, sensing fireworks, invited Congresswoman Crocket to join with all the faux innocence of a producer with a ratings quota. "Justice Jackson," the moderator began, "you argued today that the Supreme Court's role must remain above political pressure. But Congresswoman Crocket asserts that neutrality often serves the status quo. What's your response?" Jackson, unfazed, folded her hands. "Neutrality is not complicity. It is the spine of an enduring judiciary." Jasmine, sitting upright, cut in. "And yet, neutrality lets states gut the Voting Rights Act. Neutrality. Let Shelby County happen. If that's a spine, ma'am, it's made of paper." Jackson's nostrils flared. "Congresswoman, your passion is clear, but what you're advocating borders on judicial activism unchecked by constitutional constraint. And what you're defending," Jasmine retorted, "is a status quo that disproportionately silences the very people the Constitution was amended to protect." The moderator tried to interject, but the two were already locked in. Jackson's erudition clashed with Crockett's fire like steel on flint. "Your interpretation elevates process over people," Jasmine said, "and yours risks turning courts into populist battlegrounds," Jackson replied. Viewers across the country watched two black women, symbols of progress now ideologically divided, fight not over race or gender, but the tools of liberation themselves. One was the guardian of precedent, the other the herald of rupture. The aftermath was brutal. Media headlines turned their clash into a proxy war for the progressive and centrist wings of the Democratic Party. Op-eds painted Jasmine as an insurgent force undermining institutional norms, while others lauded her as the conscience of a jaded party. Justice Jackson, usually insulated from politics by the black robe, found herself subject to scrutiny she hadn't faced since her confirmation. "Is judicial restraint masking racial complacency?" asked one Atlantic headline. Meanwhile, Jasmine received threats and praise in equal measure, her district offices flooded with both roses and rage. But behind closed doors, something unexpected happened. Justice Jackson, poring over Crockett's legal writings, briefs, From her time as a public defender, congressional memos, even early law review articles, began to feel an unease that wasn't born of annoyance, but respect. Her staff had printed Crockett's dissenting statement on H.R. 1273, a minor education bill. Jackson expected rhetorical flourish. Instead, she found rigorous constitutional argumentation laced with deep textual analysis. One passage, where Jasmine compared the modern interpretation of equal protection to its Reconstruction roots, left Jackson still. It was brilliant, originalist in logic, radical in effect. Jackson reread it twice. "She's not just loud," she murmured aloud in her study. "She's dangerous, in the best way." The recognition unsettled her. Crockett wasn't just a voice in the wilderness. She was legal steel, heated, sharpened, and forged by poverty, struggle, and courtroom war. The reconciliation, when it came, was anything but soft. Jackson invited Jasmine, formally, into chambers during a closed-door symposium on judicial reform. The invitation shocked Capitol Hill. Jasmine, wary but intrigued, accepted. They stood face to face without an audience. "I read your dissent," Jackson began. "You took apart the Equal Protection Clause like a surgeon." Jasmine smirked. "You figured that out late." Jackson smiled back. "Better late than never." But the air was thick. "You think I'm too careful," Jackson said. "And you think I'm reckless?" Jasmine replied. Silence followed. Then Jackson. "Maybe I've forgotten what urgency feels like. You reminded me." Crockett's voice softened. "And maybe I've underestimated what it costs to keep the bench steady in a storm." For a long moment, they said nothing. Then Jackson handed her a document, a draft legal framework for a judicial transparency amendment. "Your fingerprints belong on this." Jasmine took it, surprised. "You're serious?" "I'm not always above politics," Jackson said. "Sometimes politics is the only way the law survives." Crockett's eyes narrowed, reading. She nodded. "This will scare a lot of people." Jackson's reply was near whisper. "Good." As Jasmine turned to leave, the door half closed behind her, she paused. "You weren't wrong to believe in the law," she said. "But I wasn't wrong to fight like hell for the people it forgot." Jackson didn't answer. She simply nodded. One judge to one Congresswoman in recognition. The alliance was uneasy. Temporary, perhaps. But for one moment in American history, two brilliant minds who had clashed publicly over justice and power chose privately to write something new. The twist? The draft Jasmine held would, within a year, become the most contested constitutional amendment proposal in half a century, and neither woman would ever admit who wrote the final clause. The leak came on a rainy Thursday. An intern at the Office of Legislative Counsel had forwarded the amendment draft, marked Confidential Working Group, to a friend at Politico, not realizing the seismic implications. Within hours, the document was online, titled the Judicial Transparency and Public Trust Amendment. It proposed a constitutional framework mandating real-time disclosures of judicial conflicts, a 10-year term limit for Supreme Court justices, and mandatory public release of deliberation. Memos after decisions. The political establishment convulsed. Legal scholars were stunned. Cable news ignited. But what truly shocked the country was the accompanying footnote. Primary legal theory influenced by Jasmine Crocket dissent doctrine, internal working term. Social media exploded. What had begun as a televised clash had become a clandestine collaboration. Jasmine was bombarded with interview requests. Jackson, bound by judicial ethics, said nothing publicly, but privately, the Chief Justice requested an urgent meeting. "Ketanji, what the hell is this?" he demanded, slamming the printed leak on her desk. "This goes beyond reform. This is surgical dismantling of the court's protections." Jackson, calm, responded. "It's the beginning of accountability. And if the court can't survive daylight, then maybe it shouldn't survive at all. The chief's jaw tightened. You've chosen sides. No, Jackson said. I've chosen history. Outside, protesters began gathering, some in support, some in fury. The steps of the Supreme Court had become the battleground for a war neither woman had expected to fight together. On Capitol Hill, Jasmine was under siege. Senior Democrats were furious. You gave her the draft? Hissed Minority Whip Langston. You handed our radical flank a flamethrower and lit the match? Jasmine didn't flinch. You wanted a soundbite? I gave you a solution. Moderate donors pulled funding. A key committee seat was threatened. She received a cold call from former President Barack Obama. I admire your courage, Jasmine, he said carefully. But this could unravel more than just tradition. With respect, Mr. President, she said, tradition has never protected us. Only power has. Obama was silent. Be careful, he said finally. Even revolutionaries bleed. Meanwhile, at Georgetown, Jackson faced a quiet but fierce backlash. Faculty members distanced themselves. Invitations to prestigious panels vanished. The Federalist Society drafted a memo on the growing radicalization of the judiciary, using Jackson's name as Exhibit A. For the first time, both women were alone. Their phone calls became more frequent, terse at first, then warmer. You still breathing? Jasmine would ask. Barely, Jackson would reply. Their disagreements remained sharp. Jackson refused to support Crockett's push to abolish qualified immunity. But a strange sisterhood grew between them. One night, after a death threat forced Jasmine to evacuate her Dallas office, Jackson sent her a text. I used to think you were fire without form. I was wrong. You're a weapon. And we might need you.